My name is Mel Keaton. I'm the lead chaplain here for the city of Lawrence. This meeting tonight actually covers not only city, but all of Lawrence Township. So I don't know if you know whether you live in city or township, but we're representing both those today. So this is a big idea that Emergency Management for Marion County had and reached out to us. They're actually holding these all over Marion County this week. Governor Holcomb declared this week as Winter Weather Preparedness Week. And so working with our partners in emergency management, Cert. We've got our police chief, David Hoffman, here tonight, our fire chief, Dino Batalis, and deputy fire chief, Jim Hardy. And we got a bunch of information. If you didn't get it picked up, there's all kinds of stuff back there. And just on behalf of Mayor Collier, welcome to our public assembly room. And we're just hoping to share some good information tonight and answer any questions you might have. And so we got a quick presentation, and then we'll just do our best to answer whatever questions you might have. All right, Jason, you want to come on up? This is Jason Lopez. He is the Lawrence section chief for Cert. I'll let him tell you a little bit about Cert, and then he's going to give us the presentation on weather preparedness. All right, Jason, go ahead.
Thanks, Mel. All right, so a quick rundown as to what CERT is. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. As the name implies, it's community emergency response. We don't get called out necessarily to go and fight the fires or rescue people out of collapsed buildings outside of our communities. Our main focus is directly there. However, major disasters that occur that require additional support, we help fill that gap. We can look at many different situations that have happened recently. Every single person you saw probably on the news wasn't wearing a uniform. The non-uniformed outnumbered uniformed responders. And when the clock is ticking against someone's life, that's a huge plus in their behalf. That enables them a chance. And so we learn many of the basics about what to do in order to help our professional first responders in their jobs, which is to save as many as possible. We too have that same job. Save as many as possible in order to ensure the best possible outcome of a bad situation. And CERT does a lot. We do presentations like this on winter preparedness. We do trainings of the CERT program, a 21-hour course that spans everything from searching for someone in a home, medical triage, disaster psychology, number of options. And then we take that back with us in order to be of service to our communities. So one of the things for this week is winter preparedness. Several years ago, we remember the polar vortex. Caught a lot of people by surprise, but it is the same thing that causes us to have this presentation. As it says up on the screen, the warm and worry-free, that is definitely what we're hoping for. Many times if we look around us, if we're properly prepared, we don't really have much of anything to worry about because we know what to do. Most of the preparedness that you're going to end up finding is primarily who do you contact if what you have prepared in your home isn't enough. In many cases, as you look at how we get the warnings, we get them through weather radios, through the news. Those are important to pay attention to. If they come up and say we have a severe winter weather watch, that's not just for us to say, okay, well, I can just keep on going about my business. Yes, but know that things can change. Conditions are great for it to get worse. Be aware. Don't just think that because the sky looks pretty good right now that it will stay that way. With the government side, we had a couple weekends ago the severe weather come through that hit up north with some EF2 tornadoes. There had been concern about that 48 to 72 hours in advance by government officials. They were already looking at what is the forecast, what could happen 2 to 3 days in advance. And we as citizens, we can also do that. Doesn't mean that our lives have to stop, but take it into account. The biggest piece is pointed out in the last bullet, individuals and families. Those are the most important. Each of us have people that are our families and even extended families, people that we can check in on. Of those that are most vulnerable are those in our communities that have small children, maybe single parents, or even elderly. Those are ones for us to be most attentive to as we go into this winter season. Now, the preparedness. This is a very small print slide to trying to get as much information as possible. But preparedness comes from a number of sources. It comes from taking training with the Cert program. It comes from the National Weather Service. It comes from the Public Health Department. All of these areas provide preparedness for individuals. You can go to your public health department and get more information about, a neighbor who's elderly has these conditions. What do I need to be worried about? What do I need to know should something happen and I may be the only person that can get to them to help them? In many situations, there could be, if the winter weather is severe enough, roads that are blocked off. Until first responders can get around, that may be the only help that they're getting is from you. But the difference between a winter storm watch is basically 12 to 36 hours. There's realistically not much that you can do in 12 to 36 hours if you're not already prepared. A winter weather advisory is probably a little bit better, but it just means that it's coming. So again, being properly prepared, everything squared away in your home, and you'll be ready to go. But once it hits that warning advisory, it's too late. At this point, you're probably going to end up being at home, staying off the roads. There might even be road closures where they say, stay off the roads unless it's an absolute emergency or it's emergency vehicles. It's not worth it. Polar vortex was one of those where we saw a number of vehicles sliding off the roads because they just had to go out, and they ended up having to be responded to by first responders. The blizzard warnings are the ones that really will cause issues. And those are the ones that cause a majority of our slide-offs because nobody is anticipating just how bad they are. 35-mile-an-hour winds coming across your vehicle on ice means you're nothing more than an ice skate. So if it turns into a blizzard warning, it's not worth going out. Get on the phone, get through social media, let people know how you're doing, but it's not worth going out. If you need to get to somebody or someone is telling you, hey, I need assistance, if you can't get to them, one of the key pieces that you can have ready is a communication plan. Who do you call? Who are neighbors that you can call if something comes up? If you have a loved one who's in another area who might be elderly and won't be able to help themselves, who of their neighbors can you call to say, hey, can you check in on my loved one that's here? Can you check on my father? Can you check on my mother? Know that plan. That keeps from having you to be out on the road to go check in a situation that is only going to put you at risk. Have these things prepared, and you're ready. So winter weather tips. We just talked about the watch, advisories, the warnings. But at home, each of these steps can cause problems at home. The most significant is power loss. Utilities will be working overtime to make sure power stays up. But should power go out, what do you do? Main thing that you have to remember is that your home can retain the heat for a certain amount of time as long as it's properly insulated. But you also have to consider anything else in your home or outside your home that may need to also stay warm. Pets, any type of farm animals that you may have on your property. Key pieces that are part of what you take care of. Part of your winter plan should include those animals and anything else that would be damaged or otherwise destroyed by the cold weather. If your home is properly insulated, like I said, you have time. But you have to have a decision point at which you will say, we need to go. In a little bit, we'll be talking about warming centers. Areas that you can go where you can warm up if the temperatures are dropping too low and you don't have the ability to warm in your home. But winterizing your home is a key piece. Take a look at windows. Okay. Monitor your thermometer inside your home. Make sure water lines are properly insulated. If you have water lines that are in your garage, as the temperature drops, if your garage is not perfectly insulated, even those pipes will freeze. In my particular home, I always have to watch the temperature because I have 2 pipes for the hot water that will freeze over in the pipe, and I end up having to go out with a heater and just hold it there for about 10 minutes, just long enough for it to thaw out and get the hot water flowing again. It's a little bit of a shock when you don't have any hot water the first thing in the morning on a cold morning. But weather stripping, insulation. Doorways and windows are the most common escape points for heat. Putting blankets over your windows is a great way to keep the warmth in and create an insulating barrier to the outside. The window's already keeping the wind from blowing, but it's allowing the heat to get out through the contact. Put the blanket up, it creates that barrier, similar to you putting a blanket around you. It's the same idea. Create that barrier. If you have the thermal pane windows, that also helps. But pay attention, if you have condensation on the windows, that's an indication that they're not sealing correctly. So keep an eye on that, watch your windows. If they're not clear on a regular basis, have them checked. Now, kits. One of the key things in Cert that we always talk about is our response kit. But the first thing that we teach in Cert is our families are first. If our families aren't taken care of, we as Cert members aren't going to be in the mental state of mind to go help someone else. So take a look at your family. Every person's emergency winter kit is going to be different. Every family has different needs, whether it be dietary, medication, just maybe anxiety disorders, whatever the case may be, their kit will be different. So make sure your kit has what you need. Food obviously will be essential. Take into account power loss. If you lose power, how are you going to cook your food? Your kit may require that you have some sort of gas-powered, whether it be propane, gasoline, whatever liquid fuel you need in order to cook with. But if you're going to use a liquid fuel, remember, indoors and fuel-burning stoves are not a good mix when it comes to carbon monoxide. So you may have to step out into the cold, or even perhaps your garage that's cracked open a little bit to cook so you don't kill the rest of your family. Make sure you're properly prepared. It may be uncomfortable to take those extra steps, but I guarantee you it would be better to take the extra steps than have to send first responders out because of something as simple as carbon monoxide poisoning. But think about dietary. Do you need something that requires the cooking? While cooking, you can warm up the space. But if it's going to be dangerous, what can you do to cook for your family or feed your family that doesn't require the cooking? Recently, my daughter went on a trip in which they ran out of fuel for cooking. Luckily, they took canned chili. They ate it cold, and they were fine with it. You just have to be willing to work with what you have. And in a cold situation like this, the food does provide warmth. But most of all, do not forget water. Even in cold weather, hydration is important. You can dehydrate just as easily in cold weather as you can in normal weather. So ensure your kits have water. Now, I mentioned the heating that you can get off of stoves. Don't use them to heat the room because you're only adding to the carbon monoxide risk. There are some heaters that have a carbon monoxide detector on them that they say are safe to use indoors. You still want to be careful with those because of the carbon monoxide risk. Don't leave them on for prolonged periods of time. If you are using any kind of combustibles to heat anything, keep flammable materials away. That's going to end up being way too much heat in your home if they catch something. Children are notorious when they're trying to stay warm for running around. And if you have heating equipment that they can bump into, especially if it is a fuel-burning piece of heating equipment, you have to watch that. If you're going to do anything in your home that requires fuel and you don't already have carbon monoxide detectors, A, get them, and B, go ahead and get them now. Just so that way you don't have to think about it later. Carbon monoxide detectors are great in that you can't smell carbon monoxide. So go ahead and have them ready to go so that way you are completely prepared in that regard. Chimneys are wonderful, but they are no good to you if they're dirty on the inside and present a fire hazard. Soot that gets stuck up into the chimney is just as much of a fire hazard as the sparks that fly out of the fireplace. If you don't have a screen in front, either a solid glass screen or a chain screen, those will keep sparks from flying out of the wood and getting onto the carpet and causing a bigger problem in the home. But as I said, if you don't have a clean chimney, you're running the same risk. Again, with the heating, just be careful. Make sure that what you are using, you know how to use it and you're using it properly. Watch for the kids around the home. As I mentioned with the hanging of the blankets over the windows, it's a great way to insulate. Another way, make sure you're properly dressed. Every winter I keep having to tell my kids, take off the shorts, put on the sweatpants. They don't want to. They can't move around as easy. But they're warmer, and the warmth stays closer to the body. People say, put on layers of socks. That is a good idea. But be careful how tight the socks get, because if you put too many layers on, you cut off the circulation to your feet, and then your feet are still cold. So make sure you have the correct socks that you could use during the winter to keep your feet warm. If something happens and the heating in your home just is no longer working, you've tried what you've got so far, make sure you have an evacuation plan of where you will go. It may mean you have to go across town or to another city. But if you have families and friends that are close by that potentially have power that they can use or that you can use, by all means, have that plan already set to go. It makes a whole major difference whenever that is ready to go. You aren't worried about, am I going to have what I need where I'm going? Especially if the shelters have not been opened yet. The warming centers are available to warm up, but there is a time frame for it. At a certain time, the warming centers will close. And only when the temperature drops below a certain point and the winds are blowing at a certain rate do the shelters open up. It may not be that time. So having this type of plan put together of where you will go is essential, because power outages is one of the leading causes of losing the heat in the home. The other is people just think, I'm not going to run it so much so that way I can conserve energy. No, it's winter. You need warmth. Put in the expense, run the heat. It will be to your benefit. Once the power goes out, just make sure you are trying to get everyone into a single room as much as possible. Many times a chimney will do great at warming the entire first floor. In my particular home, I can stand 20 feet away from my fireplace and feel the heat radiating out still very strongly. It heats the entire first floor really well, which is half the reason I'd have to tell my kids to put on sweatpants because they come down in shorts. So it does a good job, but you also have to make sure that you're conserving that heat in the home. It's going to escape through windows if they're not properly prepared. People leaving doors open, there goes the heat. So keep an eye on those things, and your area, your home, your community can be ready to go. So warming centers. All over the county, we have warming centers all over. Here in Lawrence, on this map, there's a few marked, but then there's a few others that have not made it to this map yet. As we're learning their locations, they're being added. But these are, again, like I said, places you can go and warm up during the evening, during the day, in the morning. If the heat is off in your home because the power is out, go to these. That's what they're there for. One of the handouts in the back was a listing of all of the warming centers. Some of them are great places to go, and they have no problems with you coming in. Take advantage of them if you find yourself in that situation that the heat is not sufficient in your home. We talked about carbon monoxide, but learn the symptoms of it. What are those indicators that will tell you carbon monoxide poisoning is setting in? Because once you're indoors, it's all staying in there. And unless there's ventilation, it's just going to get stronger in the concentration. You want to make sure that you're aware of the symptoms, you have your carbon monoxide detectors, and if you don't, you're just going to have to deal with the cold breeze coming through to keep it ventilated so that way you don't suffer from the effects of it. Now, one of the things we also run into that we have seen many times, power goes out, you've stayed as long as you can, it's getting cold in your home, and now you have to get out. But then you're not properly prepared in your vehicle for the journey that lays ahead of you. Something happens while you're out on the road, it may be a little while. The same concepts still apply. Probably had the heater running, but now you have to conserve the heat that's in there. You have next to no insulation in that vehicle, but properly prepared, you can keep everyone in that vehicle warm for just a little bit longer. The biggest way is A, going into the car with the proper clothing in the first place, and B, having blankets. Number of people I've seen when I just go to the grocery store in the middle of winter, they're wearing a light jacket and light pants just because they're thinking hop, skip, and a jump from the vehicle to the store. True, but what if something happens and you're stuck on the side of the road? It's great to plan for those best case scenarios, the ideal ones. What happens if this situation happens? Because you're not going to have a lot of time. Your vehicle can be temperamental. The colder it gets, the harder it is for it to start. Not only that, the maintenance of the vehicle is different in the cold. How many in this group has ever seen, has an indicator light on their dashboard when the tire pressure gets low? How many of you know what that little bracket is as to when the tire pressure is low? Because typically it's about a 2 psi difference, plus or minus, as to when it will go on. Which means if the sticker on the inside of the driver's side door says 35 psi, it may be already at 33 psi. Ideal pressure for that tire to be effective is 35. But you're already below, which means there is a greater risk of it not interacting with the road or even the ice or sleet as it's designed to. Yes, you'll have to be slower, but it still has a gripping ability if it's properly inflated. If it's not, you're basically becoming ice skates. But in your vehicle, go ahead and plan for the contingencies. Make sure your tank is always full. Because if you have to bug out from your home, last thing you want to do is try and get to a gas station in which, if everyone is in the same boat as you, there may not be fuel. As much of it may be out of your way to stop off and top off the tank on your way home ahead of one of these storms coming in, go ahead and do it. You don't want to be trying to do that when you're trying to get out of there because you now need to get out to a warmer location. Because by then, there may not be the fuel available because of transportation delays in getting fuel in. Check windshield wipers. Like I said with the tire pressure, check the treads on the tires. Last thing you want to be is bald tires on ice. That's a dance you don't want to do. When you go out, consider your clothing. Those that spend a lot of time out in the cold weather will tell you, wear layers. And that's because as you're moving around in the outside in the cold weather, your body is heating up. And if you're able to take a layer off to cool your body back down, that's fine. As soon as your body cools back down, put that layer back on. The other reason for that is because as you sweat and your clothes absorb the sweat, those clothes are going to get cold. So regulate your body by shedding a layer, putting it back on, shedding a layer, putting it back on. That will help regulate your body temperature so you do not sweat excessively and end up causing the interior of your clothing to be wet because of the sweat. Many times you'll find as you are out and about, you can find little face masks that very well protect your face in cold weather. They work great. They have a little notch that goes over the nose so you can still breathe through, but it covers your mouth so you can still breathe through it and talk through it, but you're not sucking in a large amount of cold air. One of the worst things to be looking in the wind is you get a nice big gust of cold air and breathe in through your mouth, and it just feels like you just sucked in a nice big ice cream cone. Not a good feeling. But above all, it's not something you want to do because that's a very rapid decrease in body temperature that you just sucked in. Your body feels that. Wear the face mask, earmuffs, hat, scarf. Use all of that to help regulate and keep yourself warm. But you're going to find some people that don't. They're not paying attention. They're out and about. They're thinking, oh, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling nice and cool. They're risking hypothermia. And this is where it gets very dangerous. Because right behind hypothermia is frostbite. The shivering, a little bit of confusion, gradually becoming more confusion, key indicators of hypothermia. Infants are not going to be able to tell you, but there will be indicators, and those need to be known and watched for. Because then you have to warm them back up. Again, get to a warming center. If it's your home and you have heat, get them in and warm them up. If you don't have heat in your home, get to a warming center. They need to warm back up. But they don't need to warm back up in the form of a thermal shock. Their body is cold. They need to warm up as quickly as possible, but not to the extent that you cause damage to their body. Warm the chest, put blankets around them. Warm beverages, not hot, but warm, because again, it's the thermal shock of the beverage going in. Their body is already cold. They don't need the hot. But above all, you don't know the extent of the hypothermia. The worse it gets, the longer it's going to take and the more medical help that they're going to need, especially if they've already hit the frostbite stage. Once the skin freezes, it's gone. There's not anything that can be done to recover it. Mostly affected are the areas that are the farthest extremities: toes, fingers, cheeks, ears. They are the most exposed because when you consider surface area exposed to the winter weather, those are the areas that are most exposed. If you find it, The only thing you can do is seek the medical attention. There's nothing you can do to recover out of the frostbite. Other areas underneath it are on its way, as far as hypothermia, to frostbite. And that is why you need the medical attention. You need to get somewhere where they can start to reverse that process. But the reason that we run into situations like this is because of a misconception on what is a wind chill. A wind chill is a combination of temperature and wind speed. Evaporation of moisture off of your body is what makes you feel cold, and the faster the wind is doing that on a lower temperature, the colder it feels. And the faster hypothermia and frostbite will set in. The purple section that you see up here is basically your 5 minutes. So -15 with a 45 mile an hour, it's going to feel like -51 degrees. A, you shouldn't be outside. B, if you have to go outside, less than 5 minutes. Preferably less than 1. But it's very quick. Because not only would you go out and risk lowering your body temperature to that point, but now you have to come back in and take in the process of warming yourself back up. If you're not properly equipped, it's going to take a lot longer. If at some point that you are not able to get to immediate medical care, there are some things that you can do. One of the main things is don't have the person use what has been affected by the frostbite. Keep them as warm as possible. And don't rub the frostbite area. It's only going to cause more damage. No heating pads. Don't put them near the fireplace because that's only going to rapidly cause more damage because you've already damaged the outer skin. There's nothing protecting anything else underneath. But above all, be patient and get them to the medical care that they need. Now, as I had mentioned with the Cert program, we help the community in many of these instances. We've helped staff 911 centers. We've actually gone and helped with people who are elderly, not capable of taking care of themselves. And we partner with, in this particular case with Lawrence Township, the city of Lawrence, to help them in these endeavors. Polar vortex, we were overrun with 911 calls to the extent that Cert was called in to help fill in to answer those calls. That is the extent that a winter weather front comes through and causes things to go completely out of control. And we have to come in and help fill the gap because they are just overwhelmed trying to answer all of these calls and get to everyone as quickly as possible. Because Cert truly does empower us as citizens of our community to assist them. For the most part, they're going to be responding as best they can to the main focus of any disaster. Cert fills in the gap in our communities where we may be looking at a period of time, upwards of a couple of weeks, before anyone's able to get to our area, depending upon how bad the situation is. As I mentioned with the Cert training, it's a 21-hour course that covers 9 modules. This goes over to disaster preparedness, fire safety. This even includes utilities, where after a disaster, utilities are compromised in a way that they affect the ability for the first responders, the firefighters, to get in and attend to those who may be trapped. We go in and help to secure the site safe for them so they can get in and do the job that we can't, because with the search and rescue side, we're not equipped. We're not trained for securing structures in a way that we can get in without it collapsing on us. They are trained in that. They do have the equipment. We don't. But we can definitely secure that location safe for them so they can then get and do their job without further concern about, are we risking our lives as well trying to get in here? Disaster psychology. It is one of those. We've seen in many cases people go into areas and they potentially see more than they were really expecting. How do we work with that? How do we help with an anti-terrorism role as citizens? We help in that regard as well. Right now, inside Marion County, we have over 3,000 members, CERT-trained members in Marion County. That includes teenagers in the Teen Cert program, campus cert for colleges, work cert for companies that have large populations on their campuses where they have their own cert team in the company. We do partnerships with organizations. Just really depends on who wants the training in order to be an asset in their community. It's a certification that basically you take with you. And through this, we assist and help ensure a better outcome at the end of any disaster. So if anyone is interested, feel free to talk to myself or the township, the county volunteer coordinator, Kim, in the back here. We can get you information on the CERT program. Or you can copy down our program manager's email, Elia. She is over the entire county. She can also get you information. And as Mel said, Lawrence is my area of responsibility as the Lawrence Township Chief. Marion County is a large area, and so about 1.5 years ago, Elia appointed me with my approval to lead Lawrence Township, and it has been a wonderful journey to get to this point where we're able to be in this particular facility sharing this knowledge with everyone. So are there any questions based on what I have shared this evening?
Jason, did you cover the warming centers?
Yes, I did.
Find that.
The warming centers, the map?
Yeah, is there a website that tells that?
The maps are not on the website yet, but there is a map out here in front.
Oh, in
that-
front.
Yeah, just right here on the table out front that has the warming centers.
Where the centers are within the township?
Yeah, so let's take a second. I want to invite our leadership up, and then we definitely want to answer your question. I think that's the biggest part. So is that it for the presentation?
That's it.
All right, so thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Jason's here for questions. CERT is a great program. Like I said, there's over 3,000 people in this county trained. That's really disaster preparedness as a whole. We're really here to discuss winter weather preparedness. So I want to invite Chief Hoffman, Chief Patalis, Chief Hardy, and Scott Salisbury, our utilities director. If they'll come up, and then we got Jason here, myself, these guys, and we want to try to answer any questions specific. I'm assuming that if you came here this evening, you've got something specific on your mind, some things you're wondering about, and then on top of that, maybe Jason's presentation gave you a couple things to think about. So Chief Hoffman's our chief of police here in the city of Lawrence. Chief Patalis, Chief Hardy, our chiefs over the fire department. Scott Salisbury is our utilities director, runs the water company, and then of course Jason with his presentation there. Make sure, before we get into question and answers, make sure that you picked up these items. This one here is a great quick down and dirty 101 on how to have a preparation kit for your home and for your car. What Jason just went over was this document here. It's just an overview of a bunch of different stuff. I mean, that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, covered a lot of ground, probably stirred up a lot of questions. That was really just the highlights, all right? This is from Scott here, utilities here in the city of Lawrence. This is specifically about water. See if I can hold it up straight there. All right, this is specifically about your water service, and we'll answer questions about that as well, because really water and power is the biggest issues we're dealing with in a bad weather situation, specifically cold weather. And then this is from emergency management here in Marion County. This flip chart right here gives you a quick down and dirty look at a bunch of different things that we might encounter throughout the course of a year. Okay, so like I said, I want to make sure that we spend the rest of our time here just answering any questions that you guys have. So you specifically asked about warming centers, right? So the way it works, and we work in partnership here in the city of Lawrence with, for the police department, fire department, we work with our counterparts on IFD and on Indianapolis Metro. I'm sure you probably are the same with utilities as far as working together. And then Indianapolis Marion County Emergency Management, which comes under Indianapolis Metro PD, Homeland Security, kind of is the overseeing organization. If we had a severe weather event, like a winter storm like we had a few years back, where we have severe weather, extreme cold, lots of long-term power outages where we had to open up multiple shelters and things. Here in the city of Lawrence and Lawrence Township, there's a map outside that you can look at when we're done that shows the location in the broader township of Lawrence. They're using fire stations, IFD fire stations, and public libraries. We don't have any actual public libraries here in the city of Lawrence, which is a smaller entity within Lawrence Township. So we have our 5 firehouses here in Lawrence that's our protocol, that if we have an event where we need warming centers, we can use our 5 firehouses. We can use this building if it has power. And then we also have an agreement with Township Schools for the old Craig Middle School out on Sunnyside Road. And we've actually ran shelter there twice in recent years. And that's one of the things that comes under the chaplain's office. If we have a need for shelter, we can actually house several hundred people, a couple hundred people there, with kitchen facilities, sleep facilities, shower facilities. And we can actually, working with other partners, be there for a long-term event. So our primary here in the city of Lawrence, and then the extremities, the rest of the township, your primary warming centers are firehouses and public libraries. Okay?
How would one know when they're open?
Whenever an event hits, you're going to get that information through primarily media, our news channels. That's TV and radio. These are always broadcast to both of those. And now everybody has social media. So for us, cityoflawrence.org, our website, as well as we have a social media presence. The City of Lawrence, our police department and fire department, all 3 have a social media presence on Facebook and on Twitter. You have a social media presence?
We are on the city's
With the city website.
Facebook and also on the city website.
Okay, so.
Radio
yeah,
stations.
radio stations as well.
No,
So,
I'm sorry, I do have phone numbers and addresses for all of the warming centers right here.
that's one of the handouts back there?
It's not a handout for everybody, but we can check when we do the map.
Okay.
On the map with their address, and we can point
Okay,
out which one is.
so Kim has some specific information, can check your address and find out what's the closest to you based on where you live in the map. Okay? Does that answer you? Okay.
I would like to interject
Go
here
ahead.
too, also, that distinction between Lawrence Township and City of Lawrence is important when it comes to the utility, because we still field a lot of calls from people who live in Lawrence Township who call us thinking they are on City of Lawrence utilities, and they are not. The city boundary is different from the township boundary, so keep that in mind.
So the way I try to tell people, and tell me if this is good, I try to tell people, if you look at your water bill for where you live, and your water bill comes from the city of Lawrence, you live in the city of Lawrence.
Right.
Otherwise, you live in Indianapolis, even though you live in Lawrence Township. And you'll get your utility service, police, and fire protection from the city of Indianapolis. All right? What else?
Well,
Go
one
ahead.
important thing to do is if the mayor enacts the Emergency Operations Center, they'll have representatives from all of our departments in one location, so we don't have to hunt people down. It's like a unified command, so we can have access. A lot of times we'll dispatch from that center, take those emergency calls. There's a lot of functions that go on, and we did that about 3 years ago out of this building. We ran emergency operations for police, fire, communications, and some of the other services in the city. So we get everybody together, either the chiefs or one of our designees will be in that room at all times, so they can bounce stuff off each other, and we make unified decisions, so everybody's on the same playing field.
And that's in conjunction with the greater Indianapolis metro area. That would include all warming centers. That would include public safety services, but that would include warming centers, shelter, anything that would be needed in an emergency.
I want to take a minute, too, from a law enforcement perspective. We see this every year in Lawrence, and I know IMPD sees it every year as the weather gets cold, and this isn't necessarily related to a blizzard, but we see a spike in auto thefts as weather gets cold. People go out in the morning, they start their cars to warm them up. And opportunistic car thieves, always, every year, it's predictable as snow in the wintertime. So please don't do that. Also, for traffic accident reduction, we tell everybody all the time, and probably don't need to tell you guys this, increase that following distance. That's probably the best thing you can do to avoid a traffic accident on slick roads, and of course to decrease that speed. I also wanted to acknowledge Councilor Freeman's presence here tonight, so thank you, ma'am, for attending. Nice of you to be here. More of our city leadership, as well as our elected city clerk, Kathy Walton. So thank you guys for attending as well. Oh, also, just this year we added a couple of four-wheel drive pickup trucks to the police fleet. Now, they're not usually used in an operational standpoint. In other words, you won't see light bars on them, but they are fully equipped with red and blue lights and sirens and laptop computers. So in the event of a polar vortex, we all remember when there were basically ruts in the road of ice and normal cars couldn't get through them. So we're prepared in that manner for patrol purposes, or if we have to transport people to warming stations. Each of the trucks can handle 4 passengers in addition to the driver, and the trucks have bed covers on them so that we can transport any equipment or any personal property of people that we take to warming centers. And I would imagine it would be an emergency operations center activation type of a thing where people just, if we get a few feet of snow, obviously if you're locked in with no power, we're coming to get you. So just, I guess, follow media instructions and be patient, and we'll do everything we can to help you all out.
And that helped, and the addition to the police department, we've, over the course of the last year and a half, we've changed most of our 2-wheel drive vehicles over to either 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. So I think both departments are better equipped now to handle, you learn every time there's some type of disaster, so to speak, you learn something from it. And so we've learned that, we need to be better prepared, but we learned something from that last experience 2 or 3 years ago. And I think the city is, and all is better prepared to handle something like this now.
Yeah. I think one of the greatest things that Jason mentioned in his presentation is just a little bit of preparation on the front end now can get you set and ready so that you don't, if you do have that power outage, if you do have that severe event, you're ready with some, with all the little things that are listed on these kits. A little preparation now will save you a lot of heartache later on. What else? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, if you have the power outage and you can't get to Facebook, etc., it makes sense to me to have some kind of a crank, solar, battery-powered radio so you could get some information.
There's all,
Not to rely on.
right. So there's all kinds of weather radios and things like that, crank radios. What Art Bell overnight always used to advertise that. But hopefully in the event of a power outage, you're going to have some power left on your cell phone. Most of us carry smartphones these days, and you're able to access things that way. That at the beginning of the presentation there, it talked about the difference between a warning and a watch and an advisory. Those are good things to understand, because as that ramps up, the imminence of a severe weather incident grows, and you should be just that much more prepared, making sure cell phones are charged, making sure batteries are good to go, making sure you're ready on those events. Sir, you had a question?
Well, it's kind of a cross between a question and a comment. Are you guys in touch with the 76th Brigade out here in the
Yes, sir.
cantonment area that's left
Yes,
over
sir.
from Florida?
Yep.
I know they've got generators at that armory.
Yeah, and the city has generators as well. All of our firehouses have generators. We have backup generators for our communications, 911 call center. And so those are contingencies for that. But yeah, we have a great working relationship with the military presence that's still here on the
You
fort.
know, that old cantonment area. Now, they're going to
Yep.
be, if it's that bad, they're going to be busy doing other things for the state.
Well, if it's that bad and the governor were to call them up, and there's a process there with the governor, with our mayor, there's a process of government there, continuity of government things that comes into play. But they would be a resource in a severe event, extreme.
And that's something that when we say we're better prepared, When that happened 3 years ago, whenever it was, we only had one station out of the 5 that had a generator. And now all 5 stations, like Mel said, are all equipped. So they're able to operate the doors, heat, air conditioning. So we've come a long way since that incident happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
I would echo that. Preparedness is everything.
Yeah.
How many of you know where your water meter's located? Is it outside or inside? Have you checked the lid on your meter pit lately? Is it secure?
No, mine's messed up. It's in my front yard.
Well, it does take a whole lot of gap in that meter pit lid for cold air to get down in there and freeze that meter in the wintertime. You're not sure? Call the utility. We'll be happy to come out and check it for you. Your inside valves, your water shutoff valves, do you know where they're located? Do you know how to shut your water off in an emergency? Do you know the valve works? When's the last time you exercised it to make sure it works? Simple things. When you change your batteries in your smoke alarm, expand that out a little bit. Exercise all the valves in your house. Make sure they work. Make sure you know where they're at. Simple things will save you a lot of cost down the road.
I think when you mentioned change the battery in the smoke detector, for me personally, I use an app that FEMA puts out and actually has reminders on there to periodically check smoke detectors, emergency kit, various things, your fire escape plan. These reminders go off, and I've actually got one that keeps going off on me because I haven't done it yet, to basically update my emergency kit. And it does it every 6 months because you'd have one for summer, one for winter.
Yeah.
So
You can even set these alerts on your smartphone. I mean, you have that capability there to remind you to do it. The other thing, I don't know how many you probably remember, we had this big storm a couple of years ago. Got a massive amount of snow, followed by a week of just really, really bitter cold. I don't know how many jobs I went out on where people's water lines and stuff were froze, and it was amazing to me how many of them were a direct result of people leaving their garage doors open, cracked just enough to let the cat in and out. No, and it happens, and I understand why that might happen, but at the same time, they don't realize, well, your water heater and your water meter is in the garage there instead of inside the house somewhere, and they just freeze and break, and it gets really, really costly.
We're coming up on 8 o'clock. You want to maybe wrap it, and we'll
Yeah.
just be around for questions afterwards?
Yeah, just make sure, is there any other questions at all?
Aaron, do you have anything?
All right.
ma'am, your hand popped up.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have one that you covered. My emergency plan for a power outage was to just, I knew that my gas furnace wouldn't work because the blower is electric and it won't work unless that blower is powered. So, okay, I would just run the faucets that are on outside walls to keep them from freezing. And I just figured if push got to shove, I'd turn on my gas oven and leave it open. You think that's like a recipe for disaster?
Yeah, the firemen are all shaking their head, yes,
That's
that
what they do in
is.
the movies in New York
No,
City.
we don't recommend that at all.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Don't trust
Why
Hollywood.
is it okay to cook then?
It's an enclosed space, and it has its own vent to get out. But if you open it, you're letting all of that back into your
Vents
home.
into the house though.
It has its own vent that goes out.
Chief Hardy, you were shaking your head pretty
Yeah,
vigorously.
we've seen everything from losing gas for like non-payment of the bill or just losing gas.
Yeah.
With an electric stove with a fan, which caused a fire, to open stoves where we get there, immediately see the stove open that caused fires and carbon. I mean, anything combustible that gets out into an open space that's enclosed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Your kitchen, your living room, and you're sitting there for an amount of time, eventually.
Or sleeping.
Or
Yeah, sleeping, you'll sleep.
Sleeping's a
never
big
know.
issue.
So-
And-
So what's the emergency heat source if you don't have a fireplace? What's safe?
You know, honestly, when you look at these handouts,
Warming
and
center.
you're prepared. You know, obviously, you gotta make sure your house is tight.
Right,
So you keep-
right.
Typically, in the winter, if your furnace goes out, it might take 2 to 3 days to get below freezing.
Yeah.
It might stay in the 60s, get down to the 40s a couple days later, and that's tolerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
Blankets, clothes, having a plan, and then finding that warming center.
Layers
So,
of clothes.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. 2 or 3
Yeah.
days is not unheard of in today's houses that you could sustain. It's gonna get cold, it's gonna get chilly, but it's not gonna be unbearable, it's not gonna be unsafe.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not gonna be somewhere where you're gonna be worried about hypothermia,
But
frostbite,
everything we're talking
things like
about
that.
this evening, whether it's winter, thunderstorms, it's plan ahead, don't be caught.
Yeah,
When
get-
the warning gets out, then a tornado comes through.
Get that
And just-
HVAC unit serviced twice a year.
And with the question about opening your stove and external heat sources, we all have heard stories about space heaters and things like that. If you're gonna use external heat sources, just be really careful. Pay attention they're not hanging by curtains and things like that. I think the current, stats are, Dino Hardy, a fire doubles in size every single minute. So you can imagine if you had a fire start while you were sleeping, by the time you were awake and aware, I mean, you've already got a pretty serious incident going on. So it's again, preparedness, being careful. When you're using those type of heat sources and things, just be vigilant. Yes, ma'am.
I saw a gizmo cold electric stove, it's about the size of a big coffee can, and you feed little twigs into it. Could you put that in your fireplace? Would that be safe?
I would read the instructions. And
Just follow those instructions.
And the-
I have a
you know,
wood-burning
one thing I-
fireplace. Love it.
Here's something to think about with regard to fireplaces, right? So what you have is you have a flue going up to outside, right? So hot air rises. When you use a standard fireplace, when you start a fire in there and you start that flow of air going up the flue, the fire needs air, so you're pulling all the warm air you might have in your house right outside that flue. So you're gonna actually cool your house a lot quicker by doing that. Best thing probably would be to seal up that flue to keep that, make sure your damper's closed. Make sure it seats properly, but make sure it's closed. But I would not recommend, unless you have a wood-burning stove that is actually gonna
prepared to do that, yeah, with a
put
blower.
heat back with a blower into the house while still venting the dangerous stuff out the flue, that's one thing. But if you're just lighting a fire in your chimney hoping to stay warm, if you sit right by it, you'll probably stay warm until the fire goes out, but you're pulling all the hot air out of your house, right up the flue.
Yeah, We're gonna be around the back for some more questions,
Yeah.
but the other thing, if they declare an emergency, we have found on both the police and fire side, that people are out there driving, it hurts us getting to somebody's house if there's stranded cars out there because you get stuck, so fire trucks, ambulance, police cars, we can't get to you. So if they're telling you to stay home, because it does really put us in a bad way trying to get to an emergency situation. And we've had to do that before, because when people get stuck, their cars stay there, they can't get a record there in a timely manner, so it does slow our response times down quite a bit.
And our streets director wasn't able to be here tonight, but he's got an entire plan that works in conjunction with all of this for snow removal, dealing with ice, things like that. This entire team of department heads under the mayor work together to make sure this city is covered and taken care of in every day, but definitely in terms of emergencies. All right, one last round, just in case there's a question. I have one more person to introduce and we'll be done. Anything else? All right, we'll all be available to answer your questions. Elliot James just got here. She is with Metro, Homeland Security, IMA, Emergency Management. She is the Cert director for the entire county, Jason's boss, and she's kind of one that laid all this out for the entire county tonight. And so she just got here. She just wanted to greet you, and I think you got something.
I know that you guys just sat here for an hour-long presentation, so I'll make this really quick. My name is Elliot James. I am an emergency manager for Marion County. There are only 4 of us that have this position. It's a federal mandate that every county has an emergency management department. The firefighters, the first responders, the police officers get us. But no, we're here. We're very grateful that this whole team was put together. I think that speaks a volume, for the city of Lawrence, for every single one of these gentlemen to come out here, especially on a school night. They probably have kids, grandkids, or families that they're taking care of at home. So thank you so much. We're really out here today because we are celebrating Winter Preparedness Week. It's the National Weather Service. They're the week to promote making sure that you're aware and prepared for the winter. The National Weather Service wanted us to share with you guys. They usually give us a briefing right before winter. The next briefing is going to be November 16th, but the briefing they gave us 2 weeks ago said that the temperatures for the Midwest are going to be normal, average. Okay, they're going to be average. That means, what does that mean for Indiana? Well, in 2012, we had a Super Bowl, and everybody was out in shorts in February, okay? However, we also had in 2014 a polar vortex with minus 25 temperatures with a wind chill of minus 25. So average to Indiana, Indianapolis, Marion County, City of Lawrence, right? It just depends. The only thing that's going to be a little bit different is that there will be more, they are calling for more precipitation. So if it's warmer, of course it's going to be rain. If it's colder, of course it's going to be snow. All right, and we're out here sharing the information about the warming centers because if we have a combination of a lot of rain, the rain turns into ice over power lines. It gets really cold, turns into ice over power lines, and we have extended power outages. We want to make sure that everyone is aware of where these places are, so that families can make a plan, even if they don't have transportation, to start thinking about going to another family's home, or to seek shelter. And at any of the police or fire stations, you will not be turned away. So the majority of them are police, fire stations, community centers, and we have a lot of Indy Parks facilities as well, okay? So nobody will be turned away. Typically what will happen at a warming center, these are day centers, so they're not overnight shelters yet. If the wind chill temperatures for our emergency plan, if they turn to minus 15, then we start to open overnight shelters. Okay, so that's the threshold for the county. If we get to minus 15 or minus 25 with the wind chill, then we start to ramp up our plans and start to really having these shelters become overnight shelters. But if we don't get to that point, then these warming centers are just places for people to seek warmth. Then the Red Cross will take them, we'll send the Red Cross, the first responders will contact the Red Cross or Victims Assistance, and they will come out and help those folks. And usually, let me make just a really quick scenario. With the South Side explosion, how many of you guys remember the South Side explosion? We had about 160 homes that were affected, okay? The Red Cross came in to shelter people, and this was like a long-term recovery, right? These folks were not going to go back into their homes like in 4 or 5 days or 8 hours when the power came back on. These folks, it was going to be a long-term recovery. So the Red Cross in that situation with that many families put the families in hotel rooms. Some of them had a plan and they were going to stay with families, but as you can imagine, 2 families under one roof, after about a week, they started to say, okay, now I need help. Now we want to stay at a hotel. Okay, so it just got a little bit iffy, and the Red Cross, what they will do is they will send people first to a hotel. They have their parameters, right, that they work with. So it's got to be probably more than 100 for an overnight shelter to open, or more than 200 maybe. Okay. So be prepared, make a plan, and stay informed, and you're doing that by being here today. So thank you so much, and have a great night.
All right, thank you very much. So hey, the quick takeaway is your government is at work. We're working together. We're preparing. You need to do your part, make sure you're prepared as well. Check out social media. Like I said, we have those social media presence. One I failed to mention was Nextdoor, the Nextdoor app. We're all on there as well. Cert's on there as well. So check those things out. Take advantage of those things. We're all available for questions. You have a good night.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. You're welcome.